This is the 25th anniversary of the Oklahoma City bombing. In 1995, after the bombing, Oklahomans rushed in to provide whatever support they could, building neighborhood triage centers, providing food to fire and rescue crews, and extending a hand to those who were suffering. These acts of kindness gave us comfort and a sense of community during a very tough time. This became known as the Oklahoma Standard. As our way of honoring these acts of kindness, the Oklahoma City Dodgers Baseball Foundation will feature 25 people or organizations that exemplify the spirit of the Oklahoma Standard today. Our goal is to amplify their good works and inspire others. As Oklahomans adjust to the COVID-19 pandemic, we are encouraged and inspired by our neighbors doing good works.
Good morning, everyone. This is a very special week for us. We've done this, I think, one other time where we've combined our community spotlight with our example of the Oklahoma Standard. I'm really excited to introduce to you our guest today, Barbara Curry. Say hi, Barbara.
Hi, good morning.
Barbara Curry she likes to call herself a professional volunteer. I like to call her a walking rainbow of light because she just has an amazing gift to just bring light wherever she goes. I don't know that there's a human on the planet that would disagree with me about how much joy she brings everywhere she goes. Barbara, I'm really excited to talk to you because you were just sharing with me a few minutes ago that the nonprofit that you created, or the group that you created that is now a nonprofit, came out of just wanting to educate women. So you vote. Talk us through what the mission was and how you've grown.
Well, I started off as Women That Vote. It was my desire to introduce the African Americans to the candidate that I wanted to see, that I felt that my heart needed to be our next mayor. And he was a white man with blue eyes, and most of us have issues with that. And so I created an event called Brunch and Coffee, for mayoral candidates, nonpartisan. All the candidates that were running for mayor had the opportunity to come and express themselves, and everybody could hear them. So when we went to the polls, we could make an educated vote. So we called it Women That Vote. I reached out to quite a few women and had their photos on the flyer so that people that looked at it, I was really targeting non-voters. They could look in that flyer and relate to somebody and say, you know what, I want to attend this event. We sold out 3 times. That first year, I had no expectations of that because it was the first time it had ever been done. Nobody, never heard of it. But because of my volunteering experience and because so many people in the community were familiar with my passion for this community, they just start paying for the tickets. They didn't care. I want a ticket. I want a ticket. I wasn't even LLC. They were just, we know you, Barbara, and we sold out 3 times. And so a lot of women had to come and circle around me, and because I collapsed with fear and intimidation because I didn't have that expectation. Oh, maybe 50 to 100 people will come, 300 people. And so women gathering around me, supporting me, teaching me the ropes, showing me how to go after these sponsorships to make this a successful event. We went on, he did win, and then we did it again next year for 3 other wards that were running. We didn't sell out, but the event tripled in size because last year I included 10 to 12-year-olds, and we called it the Women That Vote initiative, youth initiative. And we had about 8 young girls, and we took them once a month through every level of government. So we visited the city level, the county level, the state level, and we even took them up to the state capitol, took them on post. And they got to touch and experience and hear and learn about what it is. And the desire of the goal was, if we get them now, plant that seed now, when they become 18, they won't be intimidated. They'll understand how the whole process, it all works together. And so that was at our event. And then we brought in the big band from Oklahoma City. And, you know, there were so many more elements last year. And then I was invited to speak at a Rotary Club. And the gentlemen were there talking about a boulder they were going to do for the Rotaries at Elmer Thomas Park. And I was sitting there, I said, hey, us women need a monument. We can get a boulder made and 100 women from all over Oklahoma, and we'll put their silhouettes on there and their little bios. And so when I went to Lita, it was the Lawton businesswoman, and we went up in there, it was 12 of us, and we want our boulder, you know. And they said, yes, yes, but you have to go to the to the Lawton Historic Society, because we wanted it at City Hall. We want our boulder at City Hall. We helped build the city. And so when I went there, they were very gentle with me, and they showed me this video of the beginning of that property, that building, that school, now City Hall. And at the end of the video, and they were just sitting there looking at me with those soft smiles. I said, oh, you wanted me to come to my own conclusion. This is not a good fit. And so the city planner said, but we're not going to leave you there. He said, meet us over at Shepler Park. And he showed me this sculpture that's already out there. And it was like, it was May 10th last year. I'll never forget. It was burning hot. And in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, what are we doing here? What are we really doing out here? It's hot. I'm a Black girl. I'm sweating. We don't like all this heat. You know, I'm glued. I'm used to being a pretty girl. I don't like being out here sweating like this. What? Oh my God, he's trying to change my agenda. And then he said, see this right here? Now let's go over here. And with his foot, he marked the X in the ground. And he said, now, if you would like to bring a sculpture, a suffragette sculpture, and my mind exploded. I was like, oh my God, yes. And that's how we came up. And so at first it was going to be one woman. And when we start talking to people about what woman would it be? Would she be Black? Would she be white, Native American? And we couldn't figure out how to put all that in one woman. Then it became 3. Then when I went to the Native Americans and start talking about we need permission on whose face to use, they said, but you can't build the sculpture without the Hispanic woman and without the Asian woman. And so now we're going to have 5 women in our sculpture, Black, white, Native American, Hispanic, and Asian, and that will represent the circle of women that fought on the front lines for our right to vote. And that's how we got to where we are.
So there are a couple of big points I want to foot stomp here about what you said. Representation matters, from everything from that first flyer where you were putting women so that they would identify and recognize themselves in the people attending your event. I think that's hugely important. And practice. I mean, being able to take those kids and lead them through all of those different exercises gets them used to, at a very early age, making sure that they know their voice matters. And we're going to talk a little bit about how this all comes full circle when we talk about you on the personal front in a little bit. But I love that Women Who Vote started as just a movement, almost a movement. And it has grown now to a nonprofit that is really creating some structure around the programs. And the suffrage monument is going to be beautiful. And you've got a special event happening Friday, August 21st. Do you want to tell us about it?
Okay, so the project itself the whole project will cost anywhere from $120,000 to $140,000. And instead of just trying to raise all of that money, we decided to break it into phases so the community could see progress and to take less stress off of us and to stop trying to pull and beg for money and nobody could see anything. So the first phase will be the lighting. And this will light the way for the project. And so we're having the 3 lights put in to represent the circle. And and that will be put in this, well, they'll be put in tomorrow, but the lighting ceremony and the sponsors that help me to pay for that will all be out there Friday, and we're going to have a voter registration. We've partnered with other organizations in the community, the Lawton Young Professionals and Bank First, and they're going to have a voter registration and a census table out there, and that will be the kickoff also for the second phase, which will be the benches. Now, the benches will come in and sit right in front of the light, right across from where the sculpture is going to be. And the neat thing about the benches is, to be a sponsor for the bench, you'll have your name beautifully engraved in a solid granite bench. This will be there forever. So your name, your child's name, your family name, business organization, whatever you want. We have 2 levels, the $300, you can have it on top of the bench, or on the side where that full panel you can have for $1,000. And if you want to add an advertisement or a bio at the bottom, you can do that as well. So we'll have 4 benches with names. And I wanted to, the first part is lighting, friends lighting the way. So I just reached out to a few friends of mine that could help me sponsor this. And now the benches will be the community circle, and the benches will be like in the half moon. And then when we jump over into raising sponsorships for the sculpture, that'll be the commerce circle. And outside of the sculpture will stand there, and in front of each woman, we're going to have a plaque with a history piece about what that nationality went through on the front lines. The Asian woman had a whole different fight than the Black woman. The Black woman, she was not only fighting, but she was being beaten, raped, and serving her master at, in the nighttime. And the white woman, they had issues too. All white women weren't privileged. Some of those white women were jailed, and when they came home from jail, they lost their children. Their husbands were adopting the children out because you're not a worthy mother, because you're out there trying to be a suffragette. So, a Native American women, that was a whole different fight. And so we want this thing to speak. And so we're doing it in phases, because the movement was done in phases. The women that started in 1848, they didn't live to see in 1920 the whole plan. It was like 3 different phases. And so we're going to have the phases of this sculpture. And this weekend, this Friday night, will be lighting the way, friends lighting the way, and we'll have our lighting ceremony.
I'm so excited for you, and I can't wait to see all the phases of this project. And I think we've definitely got a great ambassador for women's rights with you, for sure. And the fact that you see this vision and have had people who really have supported you along the way just shows that you're hitting the mark and really encouraging the next generation of suffragettes, right?
Yes, yeah. Because I'm asking people, bring your children Friday night, bring your grandbabies, bring your nieces, bring their friends. Let them all see what this is about. Because you know what, Carol, I started off at 7 watching my grandmother and her friends, and watching those women out there marching against the racist mayor and police commissioner. That's how it got into me. And so when people say, what's your why? I don't know my why yet. I just know I'm supposed to do it. And so if we start them off watching and seeing, then when they go back later and they look at those names and they go to those benches, or their schools take them and they go to Shepherd Park, you know what? I remember being here. My mommy brought me here. Look, my mom's name is on there. Look, that's my mom's business. My name is on there. And so it's boasting rights, it's legacy. This thing is about building legacy. And my grandmother's legacy was, she taught me how to be a humanitarian.
There's nothing better.
I get that.
There is nothing better than that. That's a pretty amazing legacy to leave. And we should all aspire to do that for our children, in my opinion.
Yes.
But that leads us to why we have selected you to be our recent example of the Oklahoma Standard. So for those of you watching at home, Barbara is she's not from Oklahoma. She's a transplant like me. And is I hate the term former military spouse, because it sounds like we're formers and we're not. You're a veteran.
Yes.
You are married to a veteran.
Yes.
And you came to Lawton and decided to retire here. You fell in love with this community, and but you're from Philadelphia.
Philadelphia, West
So,
Philadelphia.
oh, sorry, that's very important.
It is.
It is, because it's a beautiful city. It's one of my favorites that I've visited, but it has been known at times to be kind of rough to grow up there, correct?
It is still known to be rough. It's worse now than it was when I was growing up, because these children, they came up and they were the lock key, they were don't spank them, they were no discipline, just parents be friends with your children. And so it's worse now than when I was growing up, because let me tell you something, we didn't get those booties tapped by our parents, but if my neighbor saw me down the street, she had permission to put the switch on me, the teachers put the paddle on us, you know, and we didn't get time out, we got punishment. And so,
Oh dear. I think I could have survived in West Philadelphia.
The generation is a little different. So when I go home now, I walk lightly. I don't, I can't even go into my own neighborhood. It has to be early in the morning, early in the day. But you better not be out there 4 or 5 o'clock in the evening, because that's when it all goes down. They even have helicopters assigned over each north, south, east, west. They all have their own police helicopter. That's how bad it's gotten. But you know what? I'm not a victim. I'm a survivor.
You are, my friend.
Yes.
You are. So I had the privilege of listening to Barbara give a speech last week, or a talk. It wasn't really a speech. It was more of a talk. And why we selected her was, everybody goes through difficult times and they have challenges, and how you utilize those to really make a difference, and to be a good example of, triumph over adversity, I think is meaningful. And so you talked about how the recent events with George Floyd and some of the other things that have been happening across the country and in the world have really triggered some memories for you. And what you did was special. You used that pain and those experiences to really start conversations in your community about your experience and where we could go from here. You want to talk us through some of that? I mean, just whatever you're comfortable with.
Okay, so with George Floyd, when on CNN they had in Philadelphia where the young people were trying to pull down the 10-foot statue of former Mayor Frank Rizzo. And when I was laying in the bed, it was about 1 o'clock at night. And when they were trying to pull it down, all of a sudden I remembered who he was. And I jumped up in the bed, tear that joker down. I'm not going to say the word that I really use. And it reminded me of something that I forgot. So when I was a little girl, about 10 to 12, it was in the 70s, Frank Rizzo started off as a police commissioner. And when he got appointed police commissioner, he was on a mission, and everybody knew it, to humiliate Blacks and to rid the city of gays. And so what he would do is on the weekends, he would send out his police officers to humiliate Black men that were on dates with their family or their girlfriends, have them beat up, strip them down, and take them down to South Philly, which was his neighborhood, and put them up against the wall and have the Philadelphia Inquirer to come take pictures. And you saw the proof of that because I provided the pictures from the Philadelphia Inquirer. And we knew that was going on, and you knew to walk lightly while he was in. So one weekend, I heard the phone call come in, and I heard my grandmother crying. And at that time, children didn't ask what's going on, and you don't run up in your mother's face and say, "What is it, mommy?" No, you knew to, stay back. And I didn't know what was going on, and I heard my grandfather crying. Well, the next morning, the paper came in. I heard my grandmother run down the steps, and I heard her drop. I heard her fall, and I ran down the steps. Mommy, what is it? Well, my grandfather stayed upstairs crying because he already knew. So someone had called and told her that my cousin, which was her first grandson, was in that paper. And so when she saw the paper on the newspaper and saw his naked body, you know, on the front page, it just wore her out. So for me at that time, I was consumed with seeing a naked body because I never saw naked men before. And it was about 7 or 8 of them, like, wow. But I remember sitting there thinking, why would somebody do this? Because even through all of that, and even though my grandparents marched with Martin Luther King, they never talked about racism. So I didn't understand racism. I had white friends in Northeast Philadelphia. So I just knew that it happened, but they didn't discuss that with me. So seeing them trying to pull that statue down just really triggered that. And then a few years later, he got voted in by as mayor. And at that time, Black people weren't really voting. We had just really started because they were going through so much trying to vote. They just backed up. You know, I don't feel like being arrested. I don't feel like being beat. I don't feel like being spit on. Don't feel like being harassed. I'm just going to back up. And so when he ran, my mother and her friends, her little church friends, were trying to get other people to gather to come to the polls. Well, there was one friend, my mother's friend, she was on the front lines, and they had a march down Broad Street against the violence, just like they march today, just like all the protesters are marching, the injustices, the violence. This thing with George Floyd and all this protesting, this is not an isolated incident. All of the burning the police stations and the cars, it's not an isolated incident. It's been going on, but the marches haven't proved to get the result. And so now they start burning stuff down. Well, one Sunday after church, my grandmother's friend called, and we went home from church. When we went back down, we went to her house, beautiful Black woman, big old afro. She had a black eye, her lips were all busted up, and she was naked, and she ran upstairs just screaming and crying. So again, you know, you stay in your place. I sat downstairs, but I heard all this crying going on upstairs, and my grandmother trying to comfort her, and she just kept screaming, why? And so I said, I gotta go to the bathroom. I needed to get up there and see what was going on. And so I ran up there and I slipped in the bathroom, and I saw her up against the bathroom wall, and she was slumped down, and in between her thighs were bleeding. She had a Brillo pad because a young white cop had raped her. Rizzo had put a white cop out to rape her to get her to back up. And that was one of his tactics. You know how with gang members, you come in and you beat somebody up or you kill somebody or something. His thing was young white officers that came in on the force to become one of the good guys and to be broken in, you go out and you rape a Black woman, and that was your trophy. And so she was raped to shut her up, which, by the way, they didn't shut up. In the next few years, they got stronger and they eventually got him out. But those are the things that I witnessed. Those are the things that I forgot about. And it was when I saw them trying to tear that statue down in Philadelphia, it was a trigger for me, but it was a good trigger because it put more fire up under me. I'm not angry. I'm not mad at white people because, listen, it is white people that are my friends. White people love me. Native Americans, I have friends. I like to call myself a rainbow child because I wasn't, even in the midst of that, my grandparents never taught me racism. So I didn't know not to like somebody. I just knew that people of another color were doing some very evil things. And then, you know, Rizzo, you can even find him on YouTube and look up Frank Rizzo, and you can see what kind of man he was. And so when the mayor in Philadelphia came on not long ago, and he said, you know, we've been signing petitions, we've been doing this and this and this, trying to get this statue down. He said, but because of all of the events going on, now we finally have permission to pull this statue down. So when people think that the rioting didn't do no good, yes, it did, because now we got all of these statues of people that hurt us, that enslaved us, that did things to us that caused us to feel like less than human beings. And we got these 10-foot statues. Now they're coming down. Laws are being changed all over the nation, all over the world. And it's not about only Black Lives Matter. We never said only Black Lives Matter. We're saying Black Lives Matters because our sons are still being shot down in the street. 6 and 8-year-old little boys being locked up right here in Tulsa and Oklahoma, being, you know, handcuffed just because, and we don't have no real reason. So that's why we say Black Lives Matter. We know all lives matter, but it's almost like an insult when you say, well, all lives matter, God loves everybody. We never said he didn't. But I can't fight for white people. I can't fight for Native Americans. I can't fight for his hand, but I know what's going on with our children. So that George Floyd thing sent off triggers for me, but at the same time, it allowed me to realize how strong I am. I had to see that. I had to see my grandparents survive that. I had to look at the woman I've become and realize there's a whole lot more to me than when I was growing up in school and the things I didn't like and I didn't like being raised. There's some things that I experienced and that I saw that puts a fire in me, puts some fuel to my fire now that says, you know what, we got to get this sculpture up, because not only did we hear about history about Sojourner the Truth and Harriet Tubman, but I saw my grandmother and her friends go through it. So I'm a part of that as well. I think I'm a baby suffragette. That's what it is.
Well, I think you are too, but I think you're also a great example of, you know, we all have a choice when we are facing difficult times to let it fuel us and make things better, and to listen to one another and really come to an understanding. Your experiences are definitely not the same as mine, but I appreciate that you always take the time to share your point of view in a way that really helps us build consensus versus division. And I think you're a great example of that. You know, like I said, you are a rainbow child is absolutely a great way to describe you. You're just light, you know, and you are a flower that has bloomed where you've been planted, and sometimes where you've been planted hasn't been great, right? But you still bloomed, and that is an exceptional example of the Oklahoma standard.
Thank you,
You know?
thank you, Carol.
Well, I appreciate you so much and all the work that you're doing to encourage women to vote, and recognizing the sacrifices and the struggles of women who came before us, making sure that we had that, that right. And I just cannot wait to see the pictures and hear the success stories of Friday and beyond. So for all of you watching from home, please go and follow Women Who Vote.
Women That Vote.
Women
That Vote.
Arts Corporation now, because we're now a nonprofit.
Now on Facebook, it's still Women That Vote. We haven't changed that yet because we're gaining so great of an audience. So that portion on Facebook is Women That Vote, but the organization, you can, you know, on Google, you can Google it and see the news articles and the KSWO coverage, Women That Vote Arts Corporation, but they still say Women That Vote too. So, hey.
Well, that's a good problem to have when people recognize you.
Yes.
But please go check out Barbara's story and all those wonderful news articles, and keep track of her progress. And if you're a mom and you got kiddos, and you know, bring them down to visit this beautiful statue once it's up, and spend some time teaching your kids about the women who came before us. Barbara,
and it'll be in Sheppler Park on Gore Boulevard, 4th and Gore Boulevard.
Barbara, thank you for joining us. And for all of you who are watching from home, until we can see you at the ballpark, have a great day.
Bye-bye. Thank you, Carol.